Time now to take you through the Sunday papers, and here with me to review them today are the broadcasters and writers Gemma Forte and Edward Adu. So very good morning to both of you. Lovely to see you both. Good morning, good morning.
And hope all is well.
Lots on the front pages reflecting still on the by-election results and some of the knock-on effects of that. Gemma, kick us off with the Sunday Times take on this. Their headline is "Khan to rethink ULEZ after call from Starmer." This is after the Uxbridge by-election defeat by Labour. The Tories hung on to it. A lot of them are blaming ULEZ, this low emission zone that would have extended out to Uxbridge. So talk us through the Times' take.
That's all correct. So it feels a little bit like these by-elections, let's face it, it's a warm-up for the main event, the general election, which we know we've still got over a year, potentially, before that happens. And yet Starmer is doing everything in his power to not rock the boat. And the thing that happened in Uxbridge, I think the consensus really is that it was ULEZ that saw the Conservatives hang on there. And the Labour Party just do not want that happening anywhere else. And these sort of local issues being weaponised by the Tories, which it very much was in the literature. It was interesting that what they omitted from their literature was that actually the whole scheme in the first place was actually introduced by Boris Johnson, who was the MP for Uxbridge in 2015, and that extending it out also was a direct missive from Grant Shapps, the Conservative Transport Minister. But that aside, clearly Khan has always championed the ULEZ, and at the moment with the cost of living crisis, people with polluting cars just don't want to be punished for that and by having to pay £12.50 to enter London. And, you know, there hasn't been a proper scrappage scheme supported in order to implement it. So basically, Starmer's had a word, and it looks like, well, they're saying Khan is now in constructive listening mode. And I think that means backpedaling, not harming anything in time for the next election.
Yes, that's right. And so obviously raising questions for other low emissions policies in other cities that might be going into place. So it's be interesting to see what happens on that regard. But Edward, take us to the Sunday Telegraph, because it looks like both parties are looking at the signs from this by-election and drawing certain conclusions, and they're all focusing on green policies, aren't they? So what's Michael Gove saying, according to the Telegraph?
So Michael Gove, I mean, the language that he's using here, he's using for a relaxation. He's saying that he's basically used the term religious crusade and the relaxation of some net zero measures. And obviously going by what Gemma has said about the result in Uxbridge, I think the Tories are clearly thinking, look, for what people have said in Uxbridge, we have to kind of possibly rethink or reshape our ideas connected to net zero. So, I mean, in particular, what Michael Gove has said, of course, the Levelling Up and Housing Secretary, he is one of the things he wants to relax is about landlords who may be asked to try and sort of make their properties more sort of energy friendly. He wants that to be toned down. And then one of the things which you also mentioned, which is connected to Natural England, the environmental quango, he said they must pause their push to block new housing in around 330 areas. And this is interesting, because if they're pushing for more greener schemes such as ULEZ and low traffic neighbourhoods, which in London has become really contentious. A lot of people said, look, we can't get around 20 mile per hour zones. Most of our neighbourhoods are being blocked. And Gemma, they're talking about the results in Uxbridge, which clearly people have said, look, I mean, I spoke to a cabbie yesterday, Maidenhead, who said, look, I'm not prepared to drive to London anymore because it's going to cost me £30. I will not make money. This is certainly a cross-party issue where if parties want to get votes in the next election, they will certainly have to kind of rejig their policies connected to net zero, because if they don't, it could be catastrophic, because it's the cost of living crisis. People haven't got much in terms of disposable incomes. Mortgages are going up, and then being asked, look, you may have to get sort of work along greener initiatives with your house, in particular to landlords, and then with ULEZ. So it would be interesting to see what happens in the next year, to find out what the Tories, what Lib Dems, what Labour will come up with. Starmer asking Mayor Sadiq Khan to have a rethink on ULEZ. It will be interesting to see what happens next.
Well, it does, and it throws up so many issues, doesn't it? That, in fact, the Observer also picks up on, Gemma, because while people obviously are struggling with the cost of living and they're worried about increased costs of some potential green moves, people also are worried about climate change. And I think public opinion, the polls show that they do want action to be taken. So tell us what the Observer's take on this is.
Absolutely, and it would be ludicrous to have a knee-jerk reaction just to one constituency not liking ULEZ, to think that that means that people in this country don't care about climate change, which, as you say, all polls show they absolutely do. It's the number one issue, and we only need to look across Europe and what's happening with the frightening heat waves at the moment to know that we really need to be acting now. And also, you know, what science and business leaders are saying is, do not water down your pledges. You know, we need to become energy independent. Part of the reason that we're having a cost of living crisis is because we aren't, obviously, and we should have been, coulda, woulda, shoulda, been doing a lot more over the last a couple of decades, quite frankly, to ensure that we would be in a better and more independent situation than we are now. And we should be absolutely providing subsidies for renewables. We should be getting behind greener, cleaner energy, which would actually grow the economy and provide so many jobs, and, you know, also increase our standing globally. So yes, I think all sensible people are saying this doesn't mean that we shouldn't be tackling climate change. Of course, there are always going to be ways that you do it, and there is this push me, pull you sort of aspect with the cost of living.
Exactly. So
but
how do you get around that though, Gemma, and persuade people that it needs to be done, but how do we pay for it? That's the question that politicians are wrestling with. So what should they do about these green measures that might imply costs for people?
Well, you talk up the ones that are going to grow the economy, and you talk up the ones that are going to provide jobs. We shouldn't be drilling in the North Sea. We should be putting those subsidies into onshore wind, for example. And if we had been, we wouldn't be so dependent on the energy that we're getting elsewhere. There really are ways, but they need to be talking up these things positively. ULEZ is one policy amongst many. And also, they should be talking up how the scrappage scheme in London particularly has been incredibly unfair. It hasn't been funded in the same way that it has in other places like Bath and Bristol and Manchester and so on. So, yeah, they need to be clever about it, but certainly dumping green pledges would be...
Yeah, and I was going to say that it should reach out to the next generation, because sadly my cousin was Ella Chrissy Deborah, who sadly passed, my niece, who sadly passed away in South London. And I think she was the first person on her death certificate to say that she actually died due to pollution. So my cousin, Rosamond, has been obviously not lobbying, but campaigning, working with the Mayor of London to try and to make sure, not just ULEZ, but there are initiatives in place to try and make sure that the air in London is cleaner, because I don't think any parent would want to lose their child under that circumstance. I mean, you know, she didn't have asthma. She didn't suddenly got asthma because of the fumes, the pollution coming from the South Circular, and, you know, devastating. I never got the opportunity to meet her, sadly, but I'm sure if initiatives in place where there were with the emissions, I'm sure she'd be here with us now. But the point to it shouldn't happen to another parent, shouldn't happen to another child.
Yeah, really devastating story that, and you know, feel very sad for your family. You know, terrible thing to go through, but and it is something that people do feel passionately about. But getting the answers and how you implement it when people are struggling is a tricky one that politicians are obviously wrestling with. Edward, quickly take us to the Sunday Express. The issue of banks and debanking, which is a new expression to me, certainly. This is after Nigel Farage got lost his account with Coutts and the fallout from that. Yeah. So what's the Express saying?
I mean, love or loathe Nigel Farage, I think this case has certainly made people think. I mean, it's brought people from all sides of the table to say, regardless of whatever you think, your bank should not be telling you, because of your political allegiance or how your views are aligned, that you should have your account closed. And the Prime Minister is going to be pushing through new laws to protect freedoms of speech. I mean, I think for many people, that the whole process of placing your money in a bank is for obviously interest to grow, and you're doing it for a particular reason. But for your bank to get involved and start meddling with views and saying, well, look, hang on a minute, because you said this or because you think that way, then I'm afraid we can't have you as a customer. Then in a sense, it kind of has that scary feeling that even though you may say something which might be deemed to be minor in some circumstances, you've got to be wary of your bank, because they may call you and say, well, look, I'm afraid we don't like your views and we're going to close your account. So this is clear. This is what the Prime Minister is trying to do to obviously make sure
Edward.
He will shut woke banks.
Okay, we're out of time. But thank you both. You'll be back in the next hour, so I'll see you then. Thank you.